You are now listening to In the Trench.
Welcome back to another episode of In the Trench. Today we have a really cool guest. His name is Fabian Leija, and he is a marine biologist. And we really dove deep in today, so it's a pretty long episode. So I'm gonna make the introduction kind of quick. We're brought to you by the same sponsors as usual. We have Amore Pizza Davy. Thank you to Kayla and Kyle for always sponsoring us, and we have Alliance Technology. So check out morepizzadavy.com and alliancetechnology.com for your DirecTV and internet needs, and for any Italian food needs you might want. Anyways, let's get right into the video.
Hello.
Hello, hey, how's it going, bro?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Really nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you too.
Name's Esteban. So really cool to have you on. I've really been excited to have a marine biologist on, especially since our, the entire show is called In the Trench.
Yeah. I really appreciate the opportunity. I've never done anything like this, and it feels kind of nice that somebody's looking to me for some sort of reference in a way.
Of course. No, of course. You went to school in University of Las Vegas, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. And how long have you been studying marine biology?
So I it's always been my goal to study some sort of marine science. In terms of actually being within research of a marine science, it was like a span of like 1 year.
Okay.
My first research was more about evolution.
Okay.
Because when you're an undergraduate, just getting your bachelor's, it's more about getting your foot in the door rather than saying, okay, I'm going to do this one thing and that's what it's going to be.
Yeah.
So my first thing was evolution, which I did enjoy regardless. But eventually, being in Nevada in the middle of a desert, it's not the ideal place to be studying marine biology. And so I was lucky enough to be linked to a professor who has connections with the Mandalay Bay Aquarium here in Vegas. And we did a lot of research about horseshoe crabs.
And what kind of research did you do?
So have you ever been to an aquarium with like a touch tank where you can like reach in and like interact with the animals, that sort of thing?
My girlfriend and I went to one,
Yeah. So the problem with just captive animals in general oftentimes is that they don't live as long as they're projected to in the wild. And something similar was happening with the horseshoe crabs. They weren't living as long as we would expect them to. I'm not sure if you know what horseshoe crabs look like. I guess just imagine a big.
No. I do. I remember I found one at the beach on New Year's Eve.
Oh, that's really cool.
Like 5 years ago, and I remember looking at it, and I thought I discovered an animal because it looked so alien to me.
Yeah.
Like, I thought I was about to become rich off of this discovery.
Well, you very well could have. They're very valuable animals. They are really strange animals. Horseshoe crab, the name itself is kind of a misnomer. They're more related to spiders than anything.
Wow.
They're chelicerates, yeah. So at the shark reef, they were getting these sort of cracks in their shells, right? And you've heard of molting, how like some insects and crabs, they get rid of their old exoskeleton to later grow a new one.
Yeah.
At the shark reef, they weren't doing that. So with these cuts in their shell, it's something comparable to, like, let's say you cut your finger open with scissors or something, and just like it never healing, it just stays cut open the whole time. And so they were getting infected with a lot of bacteria. And so the component of my research was figuring out what bacteria are living on these animals, and maybe discerning whether it's directly correlated to their longevity and maybe why they don't molt. So that was what I did.
And were you able to come to some conclusion?
We were able to discover 2 pathogenic bacteria. It was Vibrio parahemolyticus, which is oddly enough something that is found primarily near the Sea of Japan, and Shigella algae, which is just an average like foodborne pathogen. It's mostly known for like you find it in sushi that's undercooked, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that discovery kind of brought up a whole new set of questions regarding Vegas is obviously like a global hotspot. People come here from all over the world to do whatever, especially to this aquarium in particular. So it became more a question of how does the transfer of bacteria occur? You could very well imagine people all over the world coming to this one touch tank and exchanging bacteria with them. Who knows what they're bringing into there? So that was something else we were interested in. I don't know if it's going yet. We have published a paper now that tracks their microbiome, meaning what bacteria live on them, from being wild caught to captivity, and it does show quite a shift. I guess the question now is how does that transfer of bacteria occur? Which bacteria are transferred? Stuff like that.
That's super interesting. And I mean, it's, to me, what it sounds like is obviously that with all the tourism, that it has to be people just transferring it to the horseshoe crab. That
Oh yeah, surely. Yeah, that definitely that's a big component of it. What I tell people, the big takeaway from what I did is near most touch. I'm pretty adamant that near most touch tanks they will either have hand sanitizer or a bathroom nearby to wash your hands.
Mhm.
Wash your hands before and after interacting with the animals. It's good for everyone involved.
Yeah.
I don't know how much the shark reef wants you to like say this, but the fact is we did find like human pathogens on these animals. And if you're not washing your hands after touching them, that could be really bad for you. So really it's in everyone's best interest. Just, wash your hands, clean your hands, do whatever you like, and then wash your hands afterwards. That's the best way you can avoid all this mess that
It's
we've kind of
really
started
good.
to uncover.
It's a really good piece of advice. And Fabian, so tell me about you, man. Do you have any like future plans, like expeditions? Like, do you want to, like, what's something that you really want to go out and study yourself, like your dream study?
So I suppose when I was younger, I always liked the better known animals, whales, dolphins, sharks, that sort of thing. This is a very competitive field, unfortunately. You really have to have a lot of affluence to get to that point very directly. And so working with the horseshoe crabs, it's not even me so much feeling like I'm settling. I genuinely very much like the idea of specializing in these animals. They are really fascinating if they don't seem like it initially. They're known colloquially as living fossils, meaning that fossils from 200 million years ago in the Mesozoic look almost damn near identical to the ones you'll find today. Like you said, they look like aliens. They look like some ancient thing that shouldn't be alive. And yeah, that's absolutely like spot on what it means. Some people this express some sort of like otherworldliness when looking to them, like, oh, this thing shouldn't be here. Like I'm looking at something that that isn't from my time, right? And yeah, no, so my plans right now is to go to graduate school, get my master's degree.
Awesome.
From there, I like the idea of getting a PhD, but that's more of a commitment. But I'm definitely want to work toward my master's. That's something that this coming fall semester I will be applying really hard, trying to get any opportunity I can. Securing that funding, securing a good position. Um, yeah, I like the idea of horseshoe crabs. In general, however, conservation is what I'm interested in. I, I like the idea of discovering new things and all that. However, I also really enjoy the idea of it having an ulterior purpose, right? And so with this work with the horseshoe crabs, it was a lot about the welfare of the animals in captivity, like discerning what is the problem with keeping them alive for a long time, and making sure that we're not just cycling through a lot of animals because we're not sure why they're passing away so quickly.
Yeah.
So it's multiple topics in conservation that I'm sure that I'm not aware of would heavily interest me. And yeah, this year is just gonna be a matter of really diving in and seeing if anybody's interested in taking me on to do something.
I mean, I'm sure it's going to happen because I'll tell you something. When I was a kid, I was actually super interested in marine biology. That's what I said I was going to be. I was going to be a marine biologist. And I used to go I mean, to me, I still am obsessed with sharks, great whites,
Hmm.
particularly megalodon. I have an obsession with megalodon. It's an unhealthy obsession. I tell everybody that there's a chance that you can't say that it's 100% gone, but it's one of those things. When I was a kid growing up, I would go to the beach and I would try to find the coolest shells. I'll try to find shark teeth if I can.
Yeah.
I did find one shark tooth in the beach one time, and it was this guy. I believe it's a tiger shark tooth, but I could be wrong. But I found this guy in what was this? I believe in Key West.
Okay.
Found this guy.
That's
Uh,
very cool. That's really awesome.
it was completely intact. It was like there's really barely any. There's one chip at like the
Mm.
bottom part of it. But my prized possession, like I said, obsessed with megalodon. I went ahead and
That is amazing. That's super cool.
I got
Yeah.
myself one of these. It's like one tooth is as long as my index finger. It's just
Yeah. No, that's insane. It's terrifying to think
that these
how
things were just
long they're
around.
taking.
Now, let me ask you a question regarding megalodon, because I know you said earlier you were really interested in sharks and eventually you want to get there. So people say typically it was like what 1 to 5 million years ago they went extinct, right? It's a pretty
Hmm.
couple million year gap. And I was talking about this on my first episode with my friends. I love my friends, but they're idiots on any topic, so we were just kind of going back and forth.
It's all
And
right.
um, I've done a lot of research on the topic of megalodon, and there has been recent findings. There's been some videos too of like there was this one video in Brazil, 2012. There's a if you want to look at this up later, so you could kind of see
Yeah, I definitely will.
it was a helicopter rappelling down in the middle of the ocean. There's a dude that was stranded floating. So the video was from the helicopter. They're going down to pick up this dude from like the drop down ladder that they drop, and
Hmm.
you could see a like 70-foot shadow swim under them. And the way it looked, it was the body was in this shape. So whales are typically like just straight up
Yeah.
cylindrical, right? But this had a very clear head, and it came down to the dorsal, not the dorsal, the tail fin, and it really came down like that.
Okay.
It was really interesting. Everybody says it moved like a shark, and to me it looks like it moved like a shark. I'm obviously very biased. I'm holding out any hope that
Mhm.
it still might be out there. But
Yeah.
what are your opinions on the possibility of it maybe still being hiding in cold water, maybe through years of evolution? That because it was a hot water animal, a warm water animal, for it to move over to like evolve into being able to survive in the cold water, like deeper.
So, one thing I like to preface, with explaining things is that we're limited to what we know at the moment, right? And that goes for any scientist, no matter with how much, how much experience they have. We are limited to our time period, right? My favorite book is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and I don't know how much you know it, but the beginning is that there's this big thing in the ocean. It's Captain Evil's submarine, but they don't know that, and it's going around sinking ships, right? And so they're wondering like, what is this thing? We don't know. And the scientists, this takes place in the late 1800s. They're like, well, we've discovered every single animal, so it's not a sea monster because we wouldn't know what it is. We already discovered everything. And that's always really amusing to me because even last year we discovered at least 5 new species of shark. So we don't know nearly everything. There are, estimated as of now, we have identified 2 million species of animals. There are projected around 10 million of species of animals out there. So we're not really close by any means of the word.
You're making me very hopeful.
So I always say, in terms of like ghost stories and things like that, I don't know if I ascribe to like very specific interpretations of it. I do want to always say, however, there are just some things we don't know, we won't understand within our lifetimes. In terms of megalodons, I'm gonna, uh deviate a little bit and mention another fish. Have you heard of a coelacanth?
Coelacanth. I will hear about it right now. How do you spell that?
Coelcanth.
Coel. Oh, I see it. I see it.
Mhm.
That is a wild looking fish.
Yeah. So
This,
that
we're
is
talking about
also
this, right?
that's right. So that is also something we like to call a living fossil, something we thought was extinct, I think 10 million years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And it's cool because it's related to the fish that eventually evolved to become every single like land vertebrate that exists now. If
So
you
that,
look at its fins, they're not just like rays, they
yeah.
have like an arm to them almost. So they're like the really ancestral descendant of what became vertebrate. But anyway, they thought it was extinct up until like the 1940s, right? They thought, oh, okay, we found fossils of it, but it's definitely fucked. This is like from the Mesozoic. There's no way. And then one time they fished one up. This ichthyologist is just walking around an African fishing village, and he sees this thing, and he's just like, "Wait, is that what I think it is?" And yeah, sure enough, it's a coelacanth. This thing we thought was dead for millions of years. It's a pretty sizable thing. I think it's about like a little more than a meter long. It's
Wow.
it's definitely not an insignificant thing. Um, so with that discovery, the thing wasn't so much of like, oh my god, these guys fished up the last remaining coelacanth in the world, right? Their thoughts was there's a population of them somewhere. That's the trick there. There has to be a population. It's I again, I'm a buffoon in the 21st century. What do I know? But based on everything we know, when it comes to these sort of really cryptic animals, there has to be a population behind them. And yeah, sure enough, we found a coelacanth population living off the coast of Africa. And even last year, they found a completely new population of coelacanths we weren't aware of before. So, you say you know a lot about megalodons. Megalodons at their peak were thought to mainly feed on whales and very large animals like that, right? That is the reason, that is one proposed theory of like why whales are so gigantic, just for the sake of being inconvenient to eat to predators.
Mhm.
So with that said, we would it'd be difficult for me to believe that we're not seeing something out there that's eating whales, right? There's plenty of nonprofits and even the National Institute of Marine Mammals in Oregon. They track whales very, very deliberately. They give them cute little names to show them on social media. They track each one because they're a species of interest. To me, it would seem very difficult to kind of miss there's something out there feeding on whales constantly and not it being extremely obvious, right?
Okay. So there have been some whales that wash up bitten in half. That has been recorded in South Africa and even in Florida on the east coast of Florida a couple years ago. Whale showed up, just the tail of the whale showed up. So it's like it's interesting to see because I know when when a whale does die, great whites feast. They go
Hmm.
and I've seen the videos and it's terrifying the way they keep chomping on the whale and I mean I would kill to see that one day up close and personal, but it's
Yeah, totally.
it's terrifying. And so my whole thing is yes, very very true that we would probably see a lot more whales wash up, and it something that big is probably hard to see, but the ocean is also immensely huge. Like we know more about the surface of Mars than we know about our own ocean.
Yeah, that's
So
correct.
so my thing is, we thought that the Kraken was a myth. We thought that giant squid were a myth, and nobody believed in it. And then we discovered it in 2005. So kind of recent in the grand scheme of things to discover such an enormous animal
Hmm.
and that we once thought was a myth. So my whole thing is that animals evolve too, like we do. We came from some a version of that coelacanth, correct? We came
Yeah.
from something like that. So my point is, if we could evolve like that, what's to say that a megalodon, knowing that its primary source of food is diminishing, and that the climate is changing. Why wouldn't they be able to evolve to maybe go down real deep? And maybe that's just where they live. Because that to me is personally what I hold the most hope for. That they're just really deep. We can't see them. There's just stuff out down there that we don't know.
And you're right. In terms of like the deep sea gigantism, that is somewhat controversial, but like well recorded sort of phenomenon where, like, roly polies,
Yeah.
isopods,
Mm-hmm.
they're like 1 foot long ones in the abyss of pelagic. It's pretty insane to think. In terms of like physiology and what elasmobranch like a megalodon would be capable of, I'm not sure how deep they're able to physically go, because a lot of those very deep sea fish have very, very particular adaptations to
Yeah.
surviving. They're not generalists at all.
I mean, what if
I,
Megalodon became bioluminescent? Like that'd be quite the thing to see.
that'd be quite a jump, for sure.
That'd be
I will concede that animals like Greenland sharks have like a longevity estimated to be something more like 200 years or higher.
yeah. They said it was the one that was like 400 years now. The one that they found just floated. How do they measure that? How does somebody go ahead and say, yeah, that guy's 400 years old?
In terms of, I don't know if it applies for sharks. I know for fish, how like they have their gills and they have like something that goes like that. That's
Yeah.
called they have a perculum bone. It's called right there. They have rings that you can kind of measure like trees,
Mm-hmm.
but we're talking about like bony fish, not cartilaginous fish. So, and perhaps something similar to that. That's something that's something I'm not sure about, to be perfectly honest. Um, I don't think they'd throw out an arbitrary number like that if I had to guess, but I suppose that's a point of skepticism too.
No, I mean, when I heard that, I thought it was a little ridiculous that there is a 400. I mean, we don't even hear about turtles living that long, and
Yeah, totally.
there's a shark going like that. But what do you think? Okay, let's say it's dead, right? They said it was dead between 1 to 5 million years ago. That they're the same way you're explaining that they date fish. I'm assume they date sharks and fossils the same way. Like if you find a shark tooth, like I'm sure there's something there that you can measure for how long it's been dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they said it was 1 to 5 million years ago. Last year, off the coast of, I believe, South Africa, because all the crazy stuff happened in South Africa, they found a megalodon tooth, a couple megalodon teeth that they said was dated under 10,000 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. So when that kind of came out, that really made me think like, okay, if this animal was around 10,000 years ago, there's not many animals that are around 10,000 years ago that aren't still around. Like,
yeah,
if we're
correct.
talking in a grand scheme of things, 10,000 years is not that long.
That was the Pleistocene. Yeah, there were still, of course, the populations that remained back then were very comparable to what we have now. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's just me saying, if this guy was swimming around 10,000 years ago, he could still be around. That's just my thing. I hope.
And I'll always say that, like I said, we're very much limited to what we know now. It's really obvious for me to say, well, we should have seen it by now, but there's plenty of, in terms of the giant squid, you were somewhat right. We've known giant squids were a thing for a couple hundred years. 2005 was the first time we saw one alive.
Okay.
Because when sperm whales wash up on shore, they open their stomachs and they primarily feed on giant squid. So we've kind of always known they've been a thing. That was the first time we've seen one alive. And that still matters, however, that's what matters to us, is seeing what's their ecology, what's their niche in this environment. And so, I even if I wanted to rain on someone's parade completely, I couldn't do it not earnestly, because it's like I said, we're very much limited. There are certainly things we don't know yet. There's things that we won't know, and within our lifetimes, maybe within the spans of human existence, we won't ever know it. So I'm never gonna say it's impossible. I'm just gonna say that there is, as far as I was aware until now, I'm really curious to dig into the things you're mentioning. Um, that evidence suggests that there is no large apex predator that likely feeds on, large cetaceans like whales.
Yeah. No, I hope one day maybe I'm right, maybe I'm not. But there is something that's a pretty popular topic right now, especially in the science community, which is very controversial as well, which is de-extinction. Have you heard a little bit of that about that?
Absolutely. Uh-huh.
So that people are for it, people are against it. Personally, I'm kind of caught in the middle because hey, if we could bring back a megalodon, I would love that because that's just my favorite animal of all time. That T-Rex are my two favorite animals ever. But
Hmm.
I do see the damage if it's still not around to introduce this animal back into the wild. I could see the potential harm in the ecosystem and just the balance of things that it could ruin. So to me, I'm caught in the middle of what I want. So
Yeah.
what's your opinion on de-extinction?
For me, it would be a very case by case basis. I don't know if you've mentioned it before. De extinction is the idea of, trying to replicate a formerly extinct species back into like contemporary times.
Hmm.
Um, it would be a very case by case basis for me. So, like we were mentioning, 10,000 years ago was the Pleistocene. It was what we call the Ice Age. What, humans were stomping around back then. Here in North America, primarily we are kind of the West Coast interior sort of place. Um, we had saber-toothed tigers, we had woolly mammoths, we had giant ground sloths, all these kinds of really large mammals. There was a paper that came out kind of stating that, like, let's just say here in Nevada, particularly, there is a lack of, large, carnivore in addition to a very large herbivore. So they're alluding to saber-toothed tiger and they're alluding to woolly mammoth, right? There's some sort of ecological balance maintained between the two that keeps it stable. The first thing I suppose you got to consider in that case particularly is that it is it's a very different climate now than what it was back then. It was icy back then. And so, let's say we're not going to necessarily bring them back, but like their role in the ecosystem can be replicated. What would that entail? That would entail bringing like African lions into Nevada and just setting them free. Could they be successful? Maybe. It's not unlikely necessarily. The question more becomes, do people want that? Do
Probably
people
not.
want African lions stomping around in Nevada and Vegas and all these places?
Probably not.
I feel in terms of bringing back a megalodon into a natural ecosystem, it will become largely a public thing where people are gonna maybe rightfully ask, do we really want
A
a large
70-foot
apex
shark.
predator back into the ocean? And if we want to get into the topic of how possible it is, maybe, you know, the manner of which this would happen isn't so much the idea of like, oh, we find a fossil and we do a DNA extraction and try to, that's likely not going to happen. Even with woolly mammoths, where we've seen like really well preserved carcasses with skin and hair and all that, it's likely not going to happen that way. What would happen? It had to be through like artificial selection, meaning like how we breed dogs. Like let's say we want a dog that is a good herder, so you breed a dog population until you get the traits you want. That's probably what you'd have to do. You'd have to somehow figure out how to breed a great white shark to be bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until you get the size you like. Is it possible? With our current technology, it's downright impossible to have a shark in captivity. But I guess your question was more like, should we? And I guess what I'll say is that the ecosystem right now is still a fairly different one that was there 10,000 years ago and beyond.
We have a
Um,
balance. Is what you're trying to say. Right now we're
in a way, yes. Obviously, we've really messed things up, and that's why I'm gonna have a career likely because we've messed things up so badly. But could the ecos in essence, we're a sort of like really destructive apex predator if you really think about it. We're out there killing whales. Not so much anymore. That was earlier, largely a 1800s problem. But the population suffered for it, right? Some northern white whales in the Atlantic Ocean might not recover. They might go extinct within our lifetimes.
Yeah.
So could they handle a megalodon being out there,
Probably
preying on
not.
them too?
Yeah.
In terms of other animals that are, I guess, more benign, like a Pinta Island tortoise, I don't think anyone's gonna have a huge problem with that. It's a different species of tortoise. It lives in one place. It'd be cool to have them back. Stuff like, I mean, I don't know what else. Those are the one that ones that emphasized to me in particular was like woolly mammoth, stuff
Yeah.
like that.
I don't see how woolly
Yeah.
mammoth would survive nowadays. Like, I don't know. I just don't see it fitting with us. With like whale, not whales, elephants have their place. We're introducing something 4 times bigger than an elephant. Like, what's it gonna do? Where is it gonna live? Like,
So interesting you bring that up. There is I forgot who was running it, but in Siberia, there's this guy opening a nature reserve that is referred to as Pleistocene Park, kind of playing off like Jurassic Park.
mhm.
Its plan is to bring a lot of large mammals there to sort of like um, create a landscape where we're approaching sort of like Pleistocene megafauna more and more as it's maintained. And there's a sort of plan to bring elephants there to try to like approach getting a woolly mammoth again.
That would be
Um,
crazy.
so I guess in a place like that, or Siberia, where it's still like decently cold,
Yeah.
is a place where it's definitely not going to be their former range. Yeah, I mean you're right. That's never going to happen with how much it's changed since then. But there are people potentially making the attempt of it, and I think that's really interesting. I
No,
don't know how successful it'll be, but
I mean, I'm selfish. I want to see things that aren't, that aren't normal. So I would love to see megalodon. I would love to see a woolly mammoth. I would love to see um I'd love to see a saber-toothed tiger also. Like, those things are cool. Or, this is gonna sound a little psychotic, but I would love to see a titanoboa. Those things to me are so cool, and how large they used to be. That's also in terms because we used to be a lot more oxygen rich back in that time. So more oxygen, bigger animals, bigger, just everything. Trees were bigger, everything was bigger. Just because we have such a huge amount of oxygen that we just don't have at this moment, which is why everything's smaller. The biggest debate for de-extinction that I see is animals that we have made extinct.
yes.
So if we've killed off for us deforesting or just straight up murdering this animal to death to eat it, that bring that animal back, introduce it back into society, into to nature, that can potentially do some good. So I'm all for that. Do that as much as you can. But in terms of like the bigger, cooler animals, I don't know. Like I said, I'm very selfish. I would love them back. Especially
If
that.
you're asking me personally, I completely agree with your notion. There are many animals that I would really enjoy seeing. I'd love seeing those really weird like Cambrian animals, like from if you ever heard of the Cambrian explosion, like when all the groups of animals came out of like really short period of time. You have these really weird looking like five-eyed like lobster looking things that just kind of went
Yeah,
extinct. We'll never see them again, but seeing things like that would be really amazing.
like those
Um,
giant
you,
shells, right? Like the giant sea snails, but that had like cephalopod tentacles at the same time. That just
the Nautilus is, yeah. We
yeah,
have a chain of Nautilus still extinct, but they're not nearly as large or diverse as they were in the Triassic. Yeah, yeah. Um, I guess I gotta inevitably look at through a perspective of like being in academics.
mhm.
It would be an extremely controversial thing to just like say, I let's bring back like one megalodon and we're just gonna leave it in a tank for people to look at it.
Yeah, that'd
That's
be
a very
horrible.
controversial proposition, right? If we had the means, it's more like should we? It'll become more of a um
That'd be
Maybe.
moral. It'd be more of a moral thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You would not believe how many moral things are in these sort of academics. Like I'm gonna, you know, go on a little tangent maybe, but I think it's somewhat interesting. So for a horseshoe crab experiment, I kind of mentioned how we were looking at the transfer of bacteria between people and horseshoe crabs. My first proposal was to like literally have just kind of sit there near the tank and ask people like, hey, do you mind if I swab your finger really quick to see what's swab your finger to see what bacteria is living on it, and then I'd have them touch the horseshoe crab, do whatever they like, and then I'd be like, oh, do you mind if I do it again, and see like what they take out of it, like to see, well, what are the people putting on the horseshoe crab and what's the horseshoe crab putting on the people,
Yeah.
right? It's an interesting thing. There is an enormous amount of red tape associated with that.
Okay.
Because you're including people into this experiment. So a lot of questions come up. Are these people going to be stressed? Are you putting these people in danger? Are these people consenting to this? Is there any legal ramifications of this? And you know how simply I explained it is literally what we're doing. And I
Yeah.
even, to like push it through, said like, let's do it with employees who work at the shark reef, because they have to be accustomed to the horseshoe crab. No one's going to be afraid of it, I'd like to think. But we didn't get going because as soon as you include people into it, then it becomes a huge problem. And
Yeah.
even something so benign and simple and easy, it's a huge mess. They don't care what you do with vertebrates alone. Of course, it's like whatever. You don't really need permission from anybody except the people who work at the shark reef. But with that said, with something so simple, in terms of like resurrecting a whole new species, I can't even imagine what kind of mess that would be.
It
So
would definitely have to be like some billionaire in some different country that wants to start a Jurassic Park like thing, and he would
yeah,
have to be the one
exactly.
to do it.
Someone who is like above the law in some
Mm-hmm.
sort of sense, right? Like a researcher in China, a geneticist. This was like 2019, I believe. She was screening a woman who was pregnant, and the baby was gonna have some sort of like terminal disease, right? Like when she was born, she wasn't gonna last very long.
Mm-hmm.
The geneticist, circumvented any scientific, paper. He didn't associate with anybody. He didn't. I don't know if he asked the parents. He might have, but basically, he just kind of did his own thing. He genetically modified that baby to like alter the gene that would have caused that terminal disease. So he essentially saved her life from like non-existence. And yeah, the baby, as far as we know, was born completely fine. She is good to go. This doctor saved her life, or scientist saved her life.
Wow.
He is under severe scrutiny. He got imprisoned, and it started up a big discourse about like, should he have done this? We have regulations in place for a reason. Besides all these like, sci-fi, like really extravagant movies about like genetically altered humans, that's what this baby is now. She is a genetically altered human that can reproduce now.
That is absolutely insane. I've never heard that story before.
Yeah, so there will be an uproar about it if someone tries to just circumvent, like, well, I'm doing it anyway because I can. They might be imprisoned. Is that worth it? Just to say I brought back the woolly mammoth? Maybe. For some people, it's worth that risk. I don't know if I'm that person, but
Doesn't have to be you or me, but hopefully somebody does it.
yeah.
I'll be there at the grand opening of whatever park that ends up being. No, I completely, again, it's such a touchy subject, the extinction, whether it's a good idea, bad idea. I'm sure it has its place to debate whether it's good or bad. But
Hmm.
I want to ask you if you do know about this one thing. So you know how NASA was created to discover more about the ocean, correct? You know about that?
I have heard that, I believe, yeah.
So there's this weird theory floating around, especially Reddit. But Reddit's a really dangerous place to be because they tell you anything. But I did look into it a little bit more. But there's a theory going around that whatever, because NASA went from searching the bottom of the ocean to now we're looking space, we're looking to move to Mars, we're looking to get out of Earth. The joke or theory going around, I personally, my opinion is that it's just one of those like funny things to think about. But it's like, what's so scary that they found at the bottom of the ocean that instead of continuing to search the ocean, they're like, you know what, we need off this planet.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know. I like telling that to people too. To me, it's just a funny little meme. It's true. I it brings up another point. We always champion the moon landing as like this big step in humanity, and yeah, it absolutely was. It's incredible, given the limitations they had back then, that they accomplished something like that. It's interesting to me that only within the 2010s, we had the first single manned mission to the bottom of the ocean compared to reaching the moon.
Was that James
And
Cameron?
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that not only was it seemingly more difficult to do because of the large time span between the two, but that it didn't receive as much notoriety.
Yeah.
Of like, we always refer to this moon landing, but then you can't, like, you pick off anyone off the street, they can tell you about the moon landing somewhat, even the biggest details. I'm be hard pressed to believe that many people really know that even happened. I think it's just because maybe it's my bias here. I'm gonna kind of go off. I think people just arbitrarily think space is cooler, and they get more funding because of it.
That's
If I
probably
had
what it
to
is.
really guess, yeah.
It's the
And
sex factor,
I'm,
sexier. That's what it is.
I never understood that. We have, in the ocean, we have really weird animals. We have extremely diverse ecosystems. Space to me, I'm not gonna hate on anybody. That's not my purpose here. Space is objectively mostly empty space. It's a void. It's a vacuum. I don't want to, take away from their findings, but I feel the ocean doesn't get as much funding or attention as it maybe deserves,
And
right?
I completely agree. If it was up to me and I decided what NASA did, I would let space be up to the independent contractors. Let SpaceX do it. Let Blue Origin do it. Let them. They have more money. They get more money than NASA. And I understand that SpaceX has a contract with NASA, but I honestly, I wish, or maybe you know what? Leave NASA doing what they're doing. They're already doing space. They've been doing space since since the 50s, really. Um, let's let them do their thing, and let's open up another branch of the government that has to do with discovering the ocean floors. I've heard a
That's
lot of
called the NOAA, the
when that,
National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
and what kind of funding do they get?
Paltry funding compared to that. Very, like, I think during the last administration, they had their funding halved outright, something like
That's
that.
that's insane to me personally. If I was ever like one of these billionaires, that's what I would do. I would go ahead and start creating. Did you ever see the movie Underwater? It's fairly recent.
I don't believe so. No.
I would watch it. It came out. It's with if you like those type of movies, it came out with Kristen Stewart from Twilight. Believe it or not, she was really good in it. She
Oh
was,
yeah.
yeah, she was. It was definitely not like a Twilight-y movie. It was about them having an oil rig because firmly I believe that if you take from the ocean hits you back. That's why whenever like you see people build like and take sand out of the beaches to build on it, there's always like a tidal wave, a tsunami, something happens. Like to me, I believe in an order of things.
I very
So,
much like the idea of that too. Yeah.
so I like to believe Mother Nature is out there like putting us in check, that we can't be taking too much. But the whole point of this movie is that we dug too deep. We went too deep. It was in the Marianas Trench that they put an oil rig to go all the way down to the bottom. And they're in the bottom there, and I don't know where they got the money, but essentially it's a horror movie. So at the end of the thing, they're in the bottom. They have like these huge like space suits to walk on the ocean floor, and they can only walk for like 5 minutes because the pressure is too crazy. And they run into this like Cthulhu looking
Oh, that's cool.
monster
Okay.
at the bottom. It's a really, really, really cool movie. I would watch it.
Yeah, I might definitely pick it up. Honestly. Yeah.
It's a super easy watch, but that to me is kind of cool. The maybe not the oil drilling, but why don't we develop more money into underwater expeditions, underwater like crafts? Like we have like Richard Branson went to space today, and he had such a cool looking craft. Why don't we put that same amount of money into developing new versions of submarines that can go that deep? Because I promise you, if we put all of our time and effort, or at least an entire company, give them the appropriate funding, and give them a whole year, I'm sure they'll figure out how to get under that deep.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's probably not. We definitely have the technology to go underwater like that far down.
This will come off me as, ranting personally, because, honestly, yes, this has personally affected me. It's that in this country, we used to be like a center of scientific innovation, and we had some of the highest education, and now simply it's just not as favored. That's not me being a boomer. It's just kind of, it's reflected in the amount of funding that scientific programs get, and it's a very like love-hate relationship with NASA, because when people think scientific funding, they don't think anything other than NASA. There's obviously other things, but let's think, if NASA isn't doing cool stuff and getting a lot of funding, then by default everything else suffers too. And so they're kind of just like our representative um to the normal populace of people, whether to do that. I you know i i am somewhat disappointed that we don't favor exploration of our ocean, or we don't favor you know, uh, amidst all this, I will say, however, my mentor, who helped me with my horseshoe crab research, Dr. Sean Neiswinter, he argues that the United States has some of the best conservation policy in the world, and I don't disagree so far. We actually have a lot of pretty good programs, a lot of really constrictive laws that will kind of put their foot down in terms of like environmental degradation. But sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes, unfortunately, special interest groups do kind of win over. So it becomes a sort of like false dichotomy where, you either like economic development at the cost of like scientific research and conservation, or you like this one, but you don't like that one.
Yeah.
And I think it's a false dichotomy, and I don't like it. And I think there there needs to be more of a discussion about what's valuable to people, rather than just like shit flinging essentially. And um yeah, I trying to get funding and trying to find programs and stuff like that, it's been rough. I mean, especially last year, it was damn near impossible to really do anything. My Everything I was doing just kind of got paralyzed straight up,
Yeah.
and we're gonna apply all over again. And that was everybody. I'm not trying to pretend I suffered something nobody did. But yeah, everyone tells you that if you're really serious about going into marine biology, it's like, don't expect to make much. Don't,
Has to be your
um,
passion.
yeah, like, um, I was at work the other day, and I'm in a Facebook group that it's about conservation jobs, and we kind of just share different opportunities to each other just to see if anyone wants to get it. There was this job in Idaho, I think it was, about tracking migrating birds, right? Um, it's a seasonal job, which a lot of these type of wildlife jobs are, which means once the migration is done, you're kind of out of a job for the time being. And I think it was like a $1,400 a month salary.
Wow.
And there were people there who were like seriously saying, "Oh man, I'm gonna quit my job and move over there and try to do this," which seems kind of crazy to a lot of us, right? Because like, wow, that's not very much for they want a degree, they want experience, and that's what they're paying you. And that's kind of the reality of the matter, is that there isn't any incentive to really encourage people to do it. It's kind of like, okay, you can do it, but it's your funeral. Like, good
Yeah.
luck with dealing with it. Um, so yeah, I don't know how that changes. I think it's just a matter of making it seem interesting or important to people.
I believe it's all about branding, realistically, how you brand yourself. So I know marine biology is a competitive field for the people that make money, like a lot of money, because either the regular salary for marine biology I know isn't like crazy, but the people who know how to brand themselves, like there's people who make money in marine biology, like making it, teaching about it, or like doing stuff with it, like your knowledge, like sharing that on different platforms. I'm sure that'll warrant a bunch more opportunities than
Yeah.
than what you're talking about, which is awesome, because personally I think we need more people like that. I think we should be putting a lot more money towards that versus like other things. um I definitely wish the best for every marine biologist, because I think it's the coolest field of study to me, over space,
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I
over
appreciate that.
anything. Marine biology is awesome. I when I was a kid, I was into it so much. I just have a horrible, I have two fears in the world, and both fears have to do with animals. Number one being the ocean. I'm I love the ocean. I will go on a boat. I will go on cruises. I will not get in the water, in deep water. I just can't. Just the thought of not knowing
I
what's
agree.
around me, it's so terrifying to me. And number two, spiders. And I just yeah, I can't deal with either of them.
Have
But
you seen a horseshoe crab face up, like all the
I
legs and
have, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Believe it or not, crabs, horseshoe crabs, crustaceans, all those stuff, um, don't freak me out.
That's interesting.
I'll hold a crab, but a spider that big, my girlfriend has to kill it for me, or else I'll
Oh,
freak out.
okay.
I can't. I
You
can't.
know, now that you admit that to me, I'll admit something too. Last year, I kind of said I was kind of sitting on my hands, not doing much. So I figured, okay, I'll get scuba certified because that's something I can do here. Um, Basically, what it composes of is they teach you how to do things, which makes sense, and then they spend 2 whole days basically telling you like how to deal with the absolute worst case scenarios,
No, no. See, that would
right?
freak me out.
So they're like, okay, we're gonna rip off your tube now, and you have to like breathe out of the bubbles coming out of your like ripped open oxygen tank. We're gonna take your mask out, and you have to like fill it up with air again. Or like, oh, you just have to go from the bottom to like the surface just without breathing anything, because in case that happens. So they just teach you to do like the absolute like shittiest things that can happen to you, right? It's I don't recall a period when it's like, okay, just swim around and enjoy yourself and get a feel for it. It was like, okay, now do this really horrible thing. Okay, now do this really horrible thing.
Yeah.
And that was in a pool, by the way. That was in a pool. It's like 15 feet deep, but And the like final task, so to speak, is you go to like an actual open water like ecosystem. So we went to Lake Mojave in Arizona. Um, it's really murky, right? You can't see like 4 feet in front of you.
I just got
They
anxiety. You have no idea.
they have a rope, right? It's like a
Yeah.
buoy that floats at the top, but it's weighted, so like you can climb up and down the rope. I got in almost to the bottom of the 15 feet deep to the seabed, and it was really cool because you could see like fish swimming around and all this. It was a really nice feeling. It's the first time I felt like, oh man, I'm like here. But I guess I just got in my own head for a little bit, and I'm like, I can't see 4 feet in front of me. If something goes wrong, I can't do much, and there's like water kind of seeping into my mask. I was like, no, I can't do it. God damn it, I'm screwed. So yeah, I couldn't do it. I couldn't even finish the first task because I was like, oh my god, I'm like so out of my element, and I
Yeah.
can't. Like I said, the ocean is like my defining personality trait to me. I think it's what people know me for.
I mean, I see your
And I'm like,
background. It's awesome.
yeah,
Your
and I
room.
can't stay down there 15 feet
Yeah.
because holy hell, it's actually pretty, daunting to do something like that to me.
Terrifying. No, it's terrifying. I can't. I personally will never go scuba diving. I've been asked a million times to go. My girlfriend's giving me a face right now because she wants to go scuba diving. But I went snorkeling one time. Like
Hmm.
honestly, not even snorkeling. Like just I went to. We have a jetty here in near where I live, and we went there for with a couple friends, and we're just chilling. I'm water's like maybe not even like it's like right here, and we're just kind of just all there, and I feel a pinch, and I know it was a crab, but I feel a pinch, and I start freaking out because I can't see it. Like I know it's a
Yeah.
crab, but it's if I could see the crab and I see it, I would let a crab pinch me. Like I would put my hand out there like here, come pinch me, and I wouldn't freak out. But if I can't see it, it's in my head. I start thinking, this isn't a crab, this is a shark, even though it's just a little pinch. Like
It's a stingray. It's a cone snail. I'm gonna die. Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
that's something that terrifies me. All those little things that could just kill you for no reason. Like the cone snail to me is such an irrational fear. My girlfriend's Brazilian. I will never go to Brazil because of that cone shell. That because it's native, it's Brazilian. It's like or at least it could be found in Brazil. I'm not sure it could be found in Florida. I don't think it's in Florida, but it's for those who don't know, and my girlfriend sitting right here wants to know too. It's a shell that looks like a cone, like any regular shell. It's got a hole inside, and if you put your thumb over that hole, like, and a needle will stick out and inject you. And most people don't know what that is, so they won't really react. But what is it like? You have to be in a hospital within 30 minutes or you'll die.
Yeah, something like that.
You have 30 minutes to get help, and you also have 30 minutes to be able to tell the doctors the right thing. If you tell the doctor, I got stung, but I don't know what, you gotta be like, no, a shell poked me, I'm gonna die. So those things. Also, like box jellyfish give me an irrational fear. You can't see it.
I mean, that's a very realistic fear, though. I think if not a box jellyfish, there's something. It has like the most amount of human deaths out of
The
like.
man of war.
That's a man of war. Okay,
The man of
got
war.
it.
Yeah, that thing is absolutely terrifying. It's another reason Australia is somewhere I will never swim. Because it's Australia.
I was offered a graduate position in Australia. That was not offered, but I found an opportunity. But I thought about it. I like the idea. I didn't get accepted, but I would have done it. It sounds like
To
fun.
study, 100% to study. That's like the best place to go. You'll find all the crazy shit over there. But as a tourist to go swim in those oceans, I got to deal with man of wars, box jellyfish. I'm sure there's some other type of shell that can kill me there also. Spiders bigger than my car. There's a super famous picture of a giant lobster or giant crustacean hanging off the side of somebody's trash can in Australia. That's terrifying. And obviously Australia is like a hot spot for great whites. Australia, South Africa, Cape Cod. Now, something that terrifies me also is because of global warming, and this is my one thing to everybody who claims it's a myth. By the way, do you think it's a myth or you?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, okay, good.
Think it's a myth.
Yeah, no. For people who think it's a myth, I'm about to prove global warming to you. Florida's most dangerous shark in the last billion years was a hammerhead or maybe a bull shark. Those are our sharks. We know how to deal with them. We see them. If we see them, we'll get out. We have reef sharks, obviously, but like the main big boys here are hammerheads, bull sharks. We found the world's largest great white shark off the coast of Tampa last year.
Oh man, yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, you're right.
They're not supposed to be here.
Yeah, another one that
great whites.
Yeah, I know we can tag onto that. That's not marine, but armadillos. They're known to be in Texas and like Mexico area. Their range is slowly expanding higher and higher and higher because the only limiting factor is heat. There's just so much. You could go out and get a vial of ocean water and measure its acidity, which is a result of like carbon dioxide in the air, and see like, oh, it's more acidic now than it was last year, and that's more acidic than that was every year previous, and all that shit. Yeah, that's another thing. I don't know how political you want to get, but misinformation like that also makes marine science and research very difficult because it doesn't become a matter of like, hey, this issue is a problem. It's convincing people that there's an issue to begin with.
And that's the whole vaccine thing too. It's like people think that there's more than science. I hate when people say, "Oh, I'm not gonna get the vaccine. I have to do a little bit more research." What research are you gonna do? Are you gonna go grab 1,000 people and do your own study? Are you gonna develop your own vaccine and do the test A and B and measure the variables? It's like when there are scientists who devote their life to save yours, and in terms of global warming, in terms of anything, it's like you gotta listen to them. That's what they're there for.
Yeah. And see, beyond that, what I like emphasizing to people is that, scientists aren't just like a personal little clique that we have like our own sort of dogma or whatever. Like we all kind of group up and do the same thing. No, there are people whose job, when you submit a paper to our journal, right, to get published, there are people whose job it is to nitpick and find every single little fucking thing wrong with what you posted, right? We, for our horseshoe crab paper, seemingly something that isn't going to affect humanity in a grand scheme of things, and like it doesn't have these huge implications. It's just about horseshoe crab bacteria. We had to revise it, I think, 5 times before they accepted it. Like these
Wow.
like were big revisions. They were like, "Oh, do this again," or "We need this information too, or else we can't know that for sure."
Mhm.
And so, just imagine the sort of process that vaccines, especially a COVID vaccine, had to go through. Somebody's job is to stomp your idea out and make sure to make your life a living hell. And if they can't do it, then because then think about it. If you kind of get complacent about it and you let something go through that shouldn't have gone through, not only do the scientists who proposed that, well, I don't even think it's the scientists who proposed that to initially to go to jail. I think the person trying to revise it and make edits, they get charged with something. They're not going to ruin their whole career just because we all have a dogma that we ascribe to, right?
Yeah.
It's not. I don't want to say it's so much combative. It's just that we want to make sure what we're putting out there is correct, and there are plenty of people out there whose job it is to make sure it remains that way.
And people need to understand that. People need to understand that everything goes through this process. For the COVID vaccine, for example, I don't want to talk on it too much because it really doesn't have to do with this,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's not something that was created in 1 year. The COVID vaccine is, well, the new technique that they developed for the COVID vaccine has been in development for like 40 years. This new development of like the way to get the mRNA or whatever for the vaccine. So it's like they just had an actual opportunity to test it with the COVID vaccine, and thankfully it was successful. But enough of that, because that's its own rabbit hole. I got
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
got one
Totally.
final thing for you because it's been in the back of my head since I was 7. I found this. It looks like poop.
Oh.
Let me see if you can see. There's a ton of shells and like crystallization in it.
Hmm.
And I'm really curious. Oh, there we go. Oh, hold on. Let me try. It's trying. The camera's trying so hard. There we go.
There it is.
There's a ton of crystallization, bunch of shells.
That's very cool.
Now, is there anything you could tell me about this? And if it is poop, can you tell me it's poop?
If it is proper, I mean, so this is where my lack of experience kind of shines through. I am not super experienced with like an actual marine environment just yet. I still live
Okay.
in Nevada, and I don't have regular access to the ocean. Um, what that does remind me of, let's go with the hypothesis that it's poop, right? What that reminds me of is triggerfish. I believe you guys actually have them down there
Yeah, we have
in
a ton.
Florida.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know, they're these fish they're these predatory fish that have like really really strong jaws and teeth. They, when you go scuba diving or snorkeling, they tell you like, oh, sharks, yeah, don't worry about them. But if you see a triggerfish, get the hell out of the way because they will like actually attack you and like they can rip your fingers off, like bite your fingers off if they want to. They're extremely territorial. They have those strong jaws because they break through mollusks, shells like that, and there's like a kind of marine sciencey meme that they just kind of poop sand. I guess their job, they eat, you know, calcium deposit in sand and they poop it out, and that's where the sand in the ocean comes from. That reminds me of that. I think it is very. I don't know how often it happens that they eat the entire like
Okay,
shell
these shells
like
are
that.
like
Uh huh.
completely
Exactly.
intact. Where is it? There you are. Come on. There we go. Yeah, they're like completely intact. And there's like a bunch of stuff in there. Like, I have, like, part of me wants to like break it open in half, kind of see what the
Right.
cross section would be, just for my own little research. But I remember I found, well, you also want to know something crazy. I didn't find this in the beach. I found
Oh.
this in a park, which makes me think it's a dog poop.
Oh yeah.
Maybe they took a dog to the beach and it ate a bunch of shells and it pooped it out. But I don't think so. Just I
Yeah.
think it's a rock. Like this is
Yeah, that's more of a paleontology question. I took a paleontology class, but I am definitely not qualified to really have very much less, have opinions about that sort of thing. That's
okay. No, that's fair. It's just
yeah,
it's something I've always had, and
that's super cool though, for
it
sure.
looks very oceany, and it's the thing. The last thing I know this. I said this was the last thing, but what's your favorite animal?
My favorite animal, I'm gonna be basic, and I'm gonna say killer whale.
That's
It's
not
always been
basic.
that way.
That's sick.
It's pretty basic, but it's cool.
I see the poster of the killer whale right there.
Yeah, I have a
The
lot. Those are
sunset.
two big murals, and those are
Yeah.
like puzzles too that I've.
I definitely see the marine biology passion. I love it. I absolutely love it. No, Fabian, listen, it was an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. It was so cool, and I hope we can maybe do it again in the future.
Absolutely. Life is really crazy right now, but I had a lot of fun. I really miss this discourse here talking about my field. I really enjoy it, and
Yeah,
I would love to come back again for
awesome.
sure.
Well, thank you again so much, Fabian, and I'll see you around.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah,
I'll definitely catch up to you later. See
obviously,
ya.
man. Have a good one. Bye.